The sky over the Bavarian Alps was unnaturally still that morning, broken only by the trailing smoke of a CH-53 transport helicopter spiraling toward the rocks below. From a ridge near Mittenwald, bright orange flame burst into the autumn air as the aircraft collided with the forested slope, its impact echoing like a gunshot through the valley. The scene was supposed to be a routine Bundeswehr training exercise. Now it looked more like the opening act of a funeral. General Major Jürgen Hollmann didn't flinch as the explosion flared. At 66, he had stood through more blasts than he cared to count. His uniform, sharply pressed, despite the dust gathering around him, bore medals from missions that never made the papers. A few meters behind him, alarmed voices blared through radios. "Rettungsteam stoppen! Zweite Explosion möglich!" he ordered with quiet certainty. And sure enough, 7 seconds later, a second blast tore through the wreckage. The medics who had heeded his warning avoided the fireball by seconds. "Wie haben Sie das gewusst?" Brigadier General Rainer Fuchs asked, his voice tight. Hollmann didn't answer right away. His eyes remained on the blaze below, reflecting a memory he hadn't spoken aloud in years. "Vor 18 Monaten, gleiche Mission, 6 Tote, damals nannte man es Zufall." The training mission was meant to be simple: simulate an extraction under hostile conditions near a remote alpine village. A sealed-off test. No real hostiles, no surprises. Yet again, a team was lost, and this was the third time in under a year. "They're not just failing," Hollmann muttered. "They're being outmaneuvered." "By whom?" Fuchs asked. "By someone who knows our tactics inside out." Hollmann replied, his voice like stone, "And we trained him." Hollmann turned toward the Bundeswehr command vehicle where a secure comms terminal awaited. "Ich brauche sofort eine verschlüsselte Leitung zur Einsatzleitung in Leipzig und holen Sie mir Hauptmann Nora Wegner aus der Logistik." "Die Logistikerin? Was soll die denn damit zu tun haben?" Hollmann gave him a look that silenced the protest. "Sie war nie nur Logistikerin." In a secure room deep beneath the Verteidigungsministerium in Berlin, Hollmann stood before 4 generals and a single civilian in a gray suit. A looping video of the explosion played behind him. 3 operations, 3 disasters, same pattern, compromised before execution, same environmental manipulation, wind, thermals, visibility, all turned against our best men. Tactics no outsider should know. "You think it's an insider?" Admiral Reinders asked. "Not just any insider," Hollmann said, bringing up a personnel file. "Thomas Rehfeld, former KSK, former BND, and once Hollmann's most promising sniper in an elite program that officially never existed. Einheit Grau." The room chilled. Einheit Grau, Gray Unit, was Germany's answer to Ghost Protocol. Ultra-classified, formed during the Cold War and buried after Afghanistan. Only a few of its operatives still lived. Fewer still were trusted. Hollmann gestured to the next image. A woman in tactical gear, face calm, eyes unreadable. Hauptmann Nora Wegner. 35 years old, covered now as a logistics officer in Hammelburg. But 10 years ago, she was our best precision shooter. 40 confirmed eliminations under extreme conditions. Wind, altitude, terrain manipulation. No one came close. Reinders raised an eyebrow. "She left the unit voluntarily, didn't she?" "She thought she did," Hollmann said quietly. "But if I'm right about Rehfeld, she's the only one who can read him, and the only one who might stop him." That afternoon, Hollmann appeared unannounced at the Hammelburg base. Wegner was buried in deployment schedules, calm behind a dual-monitor setup, a pencil behind her ear. "General Hollmann," she greeted, not missing a beat. "Sir, this is unexpected." "Not as unexpected as what I'm about to tell you," he said, lowering his voice. "Do you have a moment?" She nodded and gestured him into her office. He placed a red-marked dossier on her desk. Her eyes didn't blink when she read the name. "Thomas Rehfeld." "That's not possible," she said flatly. "It is," he said, "and he's recreating the very tactics we designed for impossible shots. Your kind of shots. I haven't touched a rifle in 3 years. Your rifle, Holman said, is still in the armory, never reassigned. She looked up sharply. A long pause followed. Then finally, when do we leave? 0400, Transportflugzeug nach Bayern. Die Übung findet dort statt. Aber es wird keine Übung. Outside, the low sun cast long shadows across the Hammelburg base. In that light, Wegner's eyes narrowed. Not out of doubt, but something deeper. Like the part of her that had never fully left the field was finally waking up again. The part trained not to shoot first, but to make the shot that ended everything. Tell me everything, she said, and Holman began. The CH-53 transport helicopter hovered low over the jagged terrain of the Allgäu Alps, blades kicking up snow and grit as it prepared to land on a temporary pad near the old NATO training zone west of Oberstdorf. Nora Wegner sat quietly in the back, strapped into her seat, her tactical gear neatly arranged, her eyes fixed forward, unmoving. She hadn't spoken since takeoff. Opposite her, General Major Holman studied her with the calm of someone who had seen too many young operatives burn out too soon. But Nora was different. Always had been. Calculating, detached, exact. Not cold, just resumed. The kind of mind you wanted behind a scope when every factor screamed, impossible. Still fits? He asked, nodding toward the rifle case she held on her knees. She didn't smile. Like I never took it off. The helicopter touched down. A ground crew waved them off, gesturing toward a convoy of Bundeswehr vehicles waiting at the edge of a ridge. A tall man in tactical gear approached as they stepped out. Oberstleutnant Fabian Kruger, he introduced himself, shaking Holman's hand. Operationsleitung vor Ort. Wir haben alles vorbereitet. Kruger's eyes flicked toward Nora, but didn't linger. No handshake, no comment, just a quiet calculation. She's your observer? He asked Holman under his breath. She's more than that, the general replied. Trust her instincts, even if they don't match your protocols. Kruger nodded slowly, but didn't look convinced. The command tent was already active. Digital topographic maps lit up a central table surrounded by a mix of KSK and Fallschirmjäger officers. 2 sniper teams were gearing up, and drone surveillance was feeding live thermal overlays from the valley below. Zielgebiet ist die verlassene Sendestation oberhalb des Bärenkopfes, Kruger begann. 6 Kontaktpunkte, 3 Simulationseinheiten, Standardübung, auf dem Papier. But nothing has been standard recently, Holman interrupted. The last 2 training missions, near Füssen and Bad Reichenhall, ended in catastrophic failure. Lost teams, communications blackouts, tactical exposure. Blamed on weather anomalies and navigation errors, Kruger said, but the anomalies are too precise. Nora stepped forward. And the terrain manipulation is deliberate. If Rofeld is behind it, he's forcing shooters into predictable positions. Wind traps, thermal bends, convective distortion. One of the officers looked up, surprised. That kind of manipulation requires months of preparation. Or the right kind of knowledge, Nora replied. Knowledge only a handful of people in this country possess. People like me. And Thomas Rayfeld. Kruger folded his arms. What's his goal? To show us that our elite forces are obsolete when pitted against someone trained in denial environments, and to draw me out. A silence settled across the tent. Holman tapped the screen. We suspect the simulated targets have been replaced by real actors, possibly mercenaries, or worse. Kruger's brow furrowed. And you're sending her in as what? Decoy? Liaison? Nora answered for him. I'll observe the sniper teams, but if their shots fail, if they get boxed in like the last unit did, then I step in. You have no authority over this mission, Kruger warned. But I know exactly how this ends if you don't let me adapt, she replied calmly. They stared at each other. Finally, Kruger exhaled and pointed to the screen. Scharfschütze 1, Feldwebel Lutz Kern, 17 confirmed kills, mostly Afghanistan. Good shooter, but conventional. Spotter is Jonas Baer, Bundeswehr Sportschütze, excellent with numbers. Nora nodded. I'll embed with their team, Observe their calculations, and if it starts to fall apart, I'll improvise." Kruger looked at Holman. "This wasn't in the plan." "It is now," the general said, "and if you want your men to come back alive, you'll let her do what she was trained for." Hours later, they moved into position. Kern and Bear set up on a high ridge, scanning the valley. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Nora lay beside them, watching the air instead of the targets, the way the dust moved, the shimmer near the rocks. She closed her eyes and breathed. And in that moment she knew Rehfeld was already watching, waiting. The trap was already in motion. The wind whispered across the ridge like a warning. Feldwebel Kern adjusted his scope, exhaling slowly as he tracked a heat signature moving through the simulated target zone below. His finger hovered near the trigger. "Wind from nordwest, Stärke 5, Bear murmured beside him, eyes glued to the spotter scope. "Geringe thermische Verzerrung." "No, it's not," Nora said quietly. Both men looked at her. She wasn't watching the target. She was watching the air, how the heat rose in fractured spirals over the sunlit rocks, how a distant patch of snow was melting at a rate too fast for the ambient temperature. "That distortion's artificial," she said. "The wind channel is deliberate. Don't take the shot." Kern hesitated. "It's clean. Range 670. I've made harder ones." "Not here, not like this." He fired anyway. The bullet went wide by nearly 2 meters. A clean miss, not even close. Below, the target, meant to simulate a hostage-taker, ducked out of view and vanished behind a rock formation. No one in the valley should have known they were being observed. But now they did. "Scheisse," Kern muttered, working his bolt. "How?" Nora stood and pulled the rifle case from her back. With swift, practiced movements, she unpacked her MTR-18 precision rifle, one of the few in the Bundeswehr built to her custom specs. Suppressed, match-calibrated, hand-checked before every mission. Bear stared. "You brought your own weapon?" "I always do," she replied, "but it's not about the weapon. It's how you read the terrain." Through her scope, she found the air itself distorted like rippling water. A heat funnel. Rehfeld's signature. "He's baiting you into straight-line shots," she said. "He wants you to miss, to panic. Then he'll counterattack." Kern looked skeptical, but Bear, more attuned to anomalies, frowned. "You think he's already here?" "He's not coming," Nora said. "He's watching. And learning." The radio on Bear's shoulder crackled. "Position Bravo meldet Kontakt. 2 Mann ausgefallen. Kein Sichtkontakt zum Feind." Kruger's voice followed. "Alle Einheiten in Deckung. Das ist kein Übungsszenario mehr." Nora didn't flinch. She was already scanning for shooting positions, reverse angles, elevation traps. And there it was, just a glint, off the cliff's edge, 800 meters northeast. "Got you," she whispered. She shifted her body slightly, adjusting her scope against the wind, then exhaled. The world narrowed. All she heard was her breath. All she felt was gravity, air, and recoil. She fired. Through the scope, she saw the shimmer of a ghillie suit flinch. A rifle dropped. Not a kill, but a warning shot. A message. Bear blinked. "How did you see him?" "I didn't," she said. "I saw the wind." Below, the attack faltered. Whoever had been directing it had just been wounded. The remaining mercenaries pulled back in practiced groups, vanishing into the tree line. Kruger's voice returned, tense but stable. "Kontakt abgebrochen. Gegner in Rückzug. Verletzte werden evakuiert." Kern exhaled hard. "Verdammte Scheiße. That wasn't a drill at all." "No," Nora said, still watching the tree line. "That was a demonstration." "Of what?" Bear asked. "Of what Rehfeld can do, and of what I still can." She stood, slung her rifle, and turned to face the approaching Bundeswehr team, their boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. Kruger was at the front. "You saw him?" he asked. "I hit him," she said. "Shoulder. Same side I hit him in Kandahar." "You're sure it was him?" Nora nodded. Only one person sets up a thermal funnel that's specific. Kruger was quiet a moment. And now? Now he knows I'm back. The mountains were silent again, but a storm was building in the distance. Rehfeld had shown his hand, and Nora had answered. The debriefing in the forward operations tent felt more like a trial than a tactical review. Nora stood to the side of the map table, arms crossed, eyes calm, as Kruger paced in front of his officers. Wir Verwundete, 2 beinahe getötet, und das alles in einem Trainingsszenario, he snapped. Wer hat den Überblick verloren? No one answered. General Major Hallmann's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Niemand hat den Überblick verloren. Wir wurden getestet von einem, der unser System kennt. Kruger turned to Nora. Und Sie sagen, das war Rehfeld? Sie haben ihn nicht eindeutig gesehen. Ich habe ihn gespürt, Nora replied, and I hit him, 845 Meter, durch ein manipuliertes Thermalfeld. Es gibt in ganz Europa vielleicht 2 Menschen, die das können. Ich bin eine davon. Er ist der andere. Silence. Hallmann opened a file and placed it on the table. Satellite imagery, tactical overlays, infrared patterns. Nach dem Rückzug wurden unidentifizierte Signale aus dem Tal empfangen. Kein Bundeswehrstandard, kein NATO-Protokoll, aber bekannt aus alten KSK-Kommunikationssystemen, modifiziert, maskiert. One of the officers frowned. Eine Nitter? Ehemaliger Insider, Hallmann corrected. Rehfeld war nie nur ein Soldat. War Teil von Einheit Grau, wie Nora. All eyes shifted to her. Kruger's voice was colder now. Warum wurde das nie offen kommuniziert? Warum sitzt jemand mit Spezialausbildung im Bereich Tarnoperationen seit Jahren in der Logistik? Sie wollte raus, Hallmann said simply. Sie hatte ihre Gründe. And yet here we are, Nora added, her tone even. He forced me back in. I didn't choose this. A comms officer stepped into the tent and handed a note to Hallmann. He read it silently, then looked at Nora. Verschlüsselte Nachricht, ohne Absender. Inhalt nur eine Zeile. Dies war nur der Anfang. Kruger rubbed his temple. Was Willer. He wants visibility, Nora said, and revenge, but not the emotional kind, the strategic kind. He wants to show the world that the Bundeswehr is predictable, vulnerable, and that even our best can be neutralized. And if he succeeds, someone asked, then our tactics, our structure, our entire special operations doctrine becomes obsolete, Hallmann said grimly. Nora stepped forward. We need to think asymmetrically. Rehfeld doesn't care about rules of engagement. He knows what to provoke. He manipulates terrain, like others manipulate code. Kruger stared at her. And you? Are you still capable of countering that? Instead of answering, Nora reached into her pack and placed a bullet casing on the table. Scratched into the brass was a mark, 3 parallel lines intersected by a diagonal, a symbol only Einheit Grau shooters used. Lost. Recognition. Warning. Challenge. I used this mark on a shot today, she said, and I got a reply. Same pattern, same message. What does it mean? Asked Bear, who had quietly re-entered the tent. Nora looked at him, her voice low, final. It means the game is on. Later that evening, Nora stood outside the mobile quarters, breathing in the crisp alpine air. A light snow had begun to fall, softening the harsh outlines of the camp. Her fingers traced the cold steel of the rifle she'd just cleaned. Hallmann joined her, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. You still see it, don't you? He said, handing her one. The shot? She asked. No, the path. She took a sip. I see something, but it's not clear yet. Only the edges. He looked at her closely. You were never just a shooter, Nora. You were a hunter. You read patterns no one else could. That's why I need you now more than ever. She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the mountains. If he's playing a long game, she said, then I need to step outside the rule book. And that means I can't do it as Hauptmann Wegner aus der Logistik. Holman smiled faintly. Then who will you be? She didn't answer. Not yet. But a new name was forming in her mind, and it would be the one Rehfeld feared most. The next morning brought silence, not peace. Snow dusted the ridge above Oberstdorf, and the stillness felt unnatural, like the air itself was listening. Nora stood in a repurposed storage container converted into a planning room, surrounded by maps, wind charts, and after-action reports. But her eyes were on the old black notebook in her hand, the one she hadn't opened since Kandahar. Inside were calculations, impossible angles, wind conversions, environmental traps, and handwritten notes from another era. Every page was a lesson, every line a warning. Rehfeld had used these same principles in yesterday's ambush, but with an evolution Nora hadn't expected. He wasn't just manipulating air currents. He was predicting decision chains. She circled a small village marked on the satellite map, Waldleiten, nestled in the lower valley, nearly abandoned after floods the year before. But now, strange signals had been intercepted nearby. Radio bursts with embedded identifiers that matched Einheit-Grau encryption from over a decade ago. She turned to Oberstleutnant Kruger. He's staging his next move from here. Kruger raised an eyebrow. A ghost town? That doesn't fit his pattern. It fits mine, she replied, which means he's baiting me. Then we hit him first, he said, reaching for his tablet. No. Her voice was firm. If we go in loud, we lose any advantage. Rehfeld will melt into the landscape. Again. We need to get ahead of him. Predict his counter to our response. Kruger sighed. You talk like you already know what he'll do. I do, she said, because he trained beside me. He learned what I learned. And he'll assume I'll follow the same logic. And you won't? I'll break it. She picked up a marker and began drawing on the satellite image. 3 days from now, Bundeswehr Mountain Division is scheduled to run a communications exercise here. She tapped the slope east of Waldleiten. If Rehfeld wants to send a message, that's his window, a staged signal hijack, maybe even a fake hostage broadcast, public embarrassment, strategic pressure. Kruger leaned in. And what's your role in this scenario? I'll be in place before he arrives, not as bait, as the interruption he didn't anticipate. He studied her. You're planning to engage him directly? If I can confirm it's him. Kruger hesitated. Then, and if it's not? Then I vanish. Later, in the armory, she stood in front of a sealed locker. A fingerprint scan, a passcode, and the case opened with a soft click. Inside, her original field rig. Matte black tactical gear, non-reflective surfaces, a precision rifle she hadn't touched since Afghanistan, every piece clean, maintained, as if waiting. She sat and began assembling it, bolt by bolt. General Major Holman entered quietly. Are you sure? No, she admitted, but he is. He nodded, then handed her a small, sealed envelope. A letter from Berlin. If this goes public, if Rehfeld does what we suspect, the Kanzleramt wants a legal framework in place. They're preparing to acknowledge Einheit-Grau. Off the record, of course. Nora stared at the envelope. We don't exist. We never did. But your results do, he said. And right now you're the only line between his game and a very real disaster. She zipped the rifle into its soft case and stood. I'll need a transport. Civilian, unmarked. Already arranged. A local forester's vehicle. Blends in. She turned to him. I'll be in the mountains by nightfall. Alone. Nora, he said, voice lower now. If he offers you an out, if he says something that sounds like a truth you always suspected, be careful. She looked over her shoulder. The only truth I trust, she said, is the one I can see through a scope. Then she was gone. Into the mountains, into the silence, and toward the man who had once been her shadow. Snow crunched beneath her boots as Nora climbed the forest trail above Waldleiten. The sky was gunmetal gray, the clouds low enough to kiss the treetops. Her civilian parka, borrowed from a forestry depot, hid the tactical gear beneath, but her eyes moved like a soldier's. Every branch, every rock was evaluated, not for beauty, but for threat. She reached a ridge overlooking the village's collapsed eastern edge. The remnants of old wooden cabins stood like broken teeth. Roofs caved in, windows blackened. It was the perfect place for someone like Rehfeld to hide in plain sight, forgotten by the world, watchful. She set up her temporary position inside the ruins of an alpine dairy hut. From here, she could see all approach routes to Waldleiten. Her spotting scope rested on a tripod. Her rifle leaned silently in shadow. Night fell early in the valley. The cold was sharp but dry. She didn't light a fire, didn't move more than necessary. At 21:17, the first sign. A faint glimmer, not visible to the naked eye. But through her scope, a pulse of infrared light near the base of the slope. 3 short flashes, then 1 long. Old code, Einheit Grau, challenge. Nora's breath slowed. She removed her glove and tapped out a return flash with a compact IR beacon strapped to her glove. 2 short, 1 long, 1 short. Her identifier. Response came within seconds. A final flash, acknowledged. She waited. Minutes passed. Silence returned. Then footsteps. Deliberate, crunching in fresh snow. She reached for her sidearm but didn't draw. He came into view, silhouetted by the moonlight. Hooded, backpack slung low, arms open, no weapon visible. She knew the gait before she saw the face. Thomas Rehfeld. She stepped out from the shadows, weapon lowered but ready. "You're late," she said. "I thought you might enjoy the anticipation," he replied, his voice older, but unmistakably his. They stood 6 meters apart. Neither moved closer. "I watched the ridge above Oberstdorf," he said. "Nice shot. Right shoulder, wasn't it?" "You shifted too late," she answered. "Predictable." He smiled faintly. "Only if I wanted to be seen." "You're escalating." "I'm demonstrating." "To whom?" "To the ones who erased us, who built us for deniability, and then abandoned us when we became inconvenient." Nora didn't answer. He stepped forward 1 pace. "I want something, Nora, but it's not your life. If I wanted that, I wouldn't be standing here." "Then what?" "Recognition, truth, for those who died without a flag, for the ones we left in deserts and shadows. You know the names? Klausner, Eberhardt, Lena." Nora flinched at the last name. "You think I don't want answers too?" she asked. "I think you still believe there's a system worth saving," he said quietly. "I don't." Silence stretched between them. Then he tossed something at her feet. She didn't flinch. A USB drive, black, military issue. "What is it?" she asked. "Proof. Blacknet logs. Operation codes. Orders that never made it to Parliament. If you bring this to the wrong people, it disappears. Bring it to the right one, and Einheit Grau will finally have its reckoning. And what do you want in return? I want to see if you're still who I thought you were." Then he turned and began walking away, vanishing into the night, without waiting for an answer. She didn't call after him. She only bent, picked up the drive, and held it in her gloved palm. Cold, real, and heavier than anything she'd carried since Kandahar. Nora didn't sleep that night. She sat in the cold stone shell of the dairy hut, the USB drive resting on the crate beside her, untouched. Outside, snow fell in slow spirals, blanketing the world in silence. Inside her mind, however, the old noise had returned. Voices, orders, names whispered over encrypted channels, the ones they never found, the ones she wasn't allowed to grieve. Lena. She closed her eyes briefly. Rehfeld had said her name deliberately, to shake her. And it had worked. By morning, the wind had cleared the skies. Visibility stretched across the valley like a promise. She packed her rifle, stowed the drive, and descended toward the rendezvous point where a Bundeswehr civilian vehicle waited, a weather-worn Land Rover parked behind a forestry station. Kruger was inside, reading a tablet. He looked up as she approached. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," she said. They drove in silence for 10 minutes before he spoke again. "You have something for me?" She handed him the drive. He weighed it in his palm, as if expecting it to burn. "What's on it?" "Files from a black archive. Internal orders tied to canceled missions. Cross-referenced kill lists. Location pings from operators who were declared missing." Kruger didn't ask how she knew. "Do I take it to Berlin?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, not yet. I want it decrypted first. Independently, off-grid. I have someone in Munich." He gave her a long look. "You don't trust command anymore." "I trust people, not systems." He nodded once. "Fair." They reached the forward camp near Füssen by noon. General Major Holman was already waiting, arms folded, face unreadable. "Well?" "He made contact," Nora said. "He gave me a drive. Claims it contains evidence of command-level sabotage. Names, orders, death lists." "Do you believe him?" "I believe he believes it." Holman gestured toward the intelligence tent. "We intercepted encrypted chatter last night. One of the IDs matched an old Einheit Grau relay signature. Rehfeld's alias, Eula." Nora looked up sharply. "He's activating something." Holman's jaw tightened. "Or someone." Inside the tent, she laid out the valley map again. "If he gave me this data, he knows I'll investigate it. So he's either setting a trap or opening a door." Kruger pointed to a marked sector on the northern edge. "Satellite picked up movement here. Nothing official. No exercise scheduled." "Then that's our next step," Nora said. Holman looked from her to Kruger. "Not with a full team. If Rehfeld wants you alone, Nora, we can't send a battalion after him." Kruger nodded. "But she doesn't have to go completely alone." She raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "I'm assigning someone to shadow you. Discreet, not military. Someone with signal experience." "I don't need a babysitter." "You'll get one anyway," Holman said. "We can't risk losing you. Not now." Later, in her quarters, Nora opened her locker and took out a smaller pouch, a sidearm holster and a flat leather case. Inside, a single bullet casing engraved with the name L. Wegner. She had never spoken of Lena, not even to Holman, but Rehfeld had known, and that meant someone had leaked mission logs. Maybe Rehfeld had seen them, or maybe he'd kept a copy. She ran a finger along the casing. A promise. A memory. Then she packed up again. A new hunt had begun, and this time it was personal. The wind off the Forgin Sea was sharp that evening, cutting through Nora's parka as she stepped off the unmarked train in a remote siding near Schwangau. The station was deserted. No signs, no waiting passengers, just mist curling low over the gravel tracks and the pale outline of Neuschwanstein in the far distance. She adjusted her pack and turned east, following the GPS coordinates Kruger had sent her. This wasn't standard Bundeswehr protocol. No formal briefings, no digital tracking. Just a string of encrypted texts and a name. Janik Kroll. Signal technician. Former cyber reconnaissance. Dishonorably discharged 5 years ago for breaching BND firewalls. Now, apparently, freelance. She found him 20 minutes later inside a crumbling alpine guest house above the lake. He was younger than she expected. Maybe 35, wiry, distracted. His laptop setup glowed in the candlelit interior, multiple screens, solar-powered batteries. Drones charging silently by the window. "You're early," he said, not looking up. "You're paranoid," she replied. He grinned. Same skill set. She dropped her pack and handed him the USB drive. "You know what's on this?" "No," she said, "and neither do you, not until we're offline, firewalled, and insulated." He nodded and slipped the drive into a secure reader, isolated from every other device. For a long time, he said nothing, just watched line after line of code stream across the screen. Then he leaned back. Oh, fuck. What? It's real. I mean, it's not just logs. This is cross-referenced internal metadata. Stuff from Sapphire, from the old Aesir files. There are kill confirmations here, tied to names that don't exist in any official Bundeswehr record. Translate that, Nora said flatly. This is a record of illegal internal operations, not just foreign targets, domestic, journalists, whistleblowers, even a Bundestag staffer. Her pulse slowed, not because she was surprised, but because some part of her had always suspected. Rehfeld had warned her this went beyond betrayal. This was systemic rot. Kroll tapped a few keys. There's a secondary archive embedded in here. It's encrypted with an Einheit Grau cipher. Can you break it? Maybe, with time. Don't try yet, she said. I want to be somewhere safe first. He looked at her. There's no such thing anymore. That night she sat by the window, with her rifle across her knees. The mist rolled in thick and heavy, obscuring the forest line. At 2:17, she saw the movement, 2 figures, no lights, moving low, efficiently. Not Bundeswehr, not locals, trained. She tapped Kroll's shoulder. How long has this place been in your name? He blinked. It's not. It's registered under a shell corps out of Estonia. Then someone still found us. She grabbed her suppressed sidearm and slid into the hallway, motioning for Kroll to kill all lights. She moved like a ghost, bare feet, soft steps, years of field muscle memory coming back without thought. One of the intruders entered through the back kitchen. Nora waited until he crossed the threshold, then disarmed him with a brutal efficiency that reminded even her what she had been trained to do. The second one wasn't so lucky. Kroll had armed himself with an old Bundeswehr shotgun from behind the stove. The blast was deafening in the quiet. Later, as dawn broke, Nora stared at the bodies. No identification. But on the collar of one of them, almost invisible under the fabric, she found a tag. Project Hesperia, Beobachter 6. She felt the cold deeper now, not from the wind, but from what it meant. They weren't just reacting, they were watching. She turned to Kroll. We leave in an hour. Burn everything. No trail. Where to? To the people Rehfeld feared the most. And who would that be? She stared at the tree line. Those who trained us. They left Schwangau just after sunrise. Taking narrow forest roads in a civilian maintenance vehicle Nora had stashed months earlier during a training rotation. Kroll rode in the passenger seat, laptop on his knees, antenna mounted magnetically on the roof. Nora drove in silence. The road curved through pine forests heavy with snow, the sun barely breaking through the fog. Her eyes scanned every bend, every blind spot. She wasn't expecting pursuit. She was expecting surveillance. We've got a tail, Kroll said calmly. Civilian? Unclear. Signal bounce. Maybe drone. Not visual yet, but someone's pinging this route. Nora didn't react visibly. Instead, she changed gears and pulled off the main road onto an old logging path, tires crunching over frozen gravel. Where are we going? Kroll asked. To someone who knows what Hesperia really was. He frowned. You think it was a shadow project? No, I think it was the umbrella under which Einheit Grau was buried. They drove for another 40 minutes before arriving at a remote cabin near the Austrian border. It had once belonged to a retired KSK commander. Officially, he'd died in a car accident 2 years prior. Unofficially, he had disappeared after refusing to testify in a closed Bundestag inquiry. Nora killed the engine. Stay in the vehicle. If I don't come out in 10 minutes, drive north and dump the drive in the Isar. Kroll nodded, swallowing hard. She approached the cabin with caution. No smoke, no footprints. But the old tripwire at the door had been moved slightly. A signal. She entered. Inside, a man stood with his back to her, adjusting a radio transceiver. Gray hair, straight posture. He turned slowly. Wegner, he said. Sturmbannführer A.D. Ulrich Mehr, she replied. I wasn't sure you were still alive. I wasn't supposed to be. She stepped closer. Do you know about Project Hesperia? His eyes hardened. I named it. What was it? Insurance, a kill switch. When Einheit Grau became inconvenient, Hesperia was meant to override us. Clean slates, new operatives, no moral resistance, total deniability. And Rehfeld? He found out too much, so they tried to use you to eliminate him. Nora's pulse ticked faster. Kandahar. Mir nodded. Your mission wasn't to stop him. It was to silence him before he exposed that Einheit Grau wasn't rogue. It was designed to become what Hesperia is now. She took a step back. And the operators they killed? Collaterals. Ones who asked too many questions. Like Lena. Nora's breath caught. She wasn't collateral. She was targeted. Mir's silence confirmed it. You have two options now, he said. Deliver that drive to someone who will bury it, or vanish with it. She looked at him. There's a third option. Which is? I bring it to someone who never forgot what we stood for. He raised an eyebrow. And who would that be? Rehfeld. Mir scoffed. He's unstable. No, he's angry, and he's right. She turned to leave. Wagner, Mir said. They'll come after you both. Full apparatus, media, intel, kill teams. You won't survive it. She looked over her shoulder. Then they better not miss. Back in the vehicle, Kroll looked up. Well? She started the engine. We're not exposing a rogue program anymore. We're dismantling a machine. And what happens when the machine fights back? She gripped the wheel. Then we show them what their ghosts can really do. The safe house in Regensburg was buried beneath a disused rail yard, protected by a concrete shell built during the Cold War. Nora hadn't set foot here in over a decade. Yet nothing had changed. The same reinforced door, the same narrow corridor lit by amber lights, the same silence that swallowed sound like a grave. Kroll followed close behind, carrying two hard cases, one with the decrypted portion of the drive, the other with portable signal shielding. As they entered the bunker, a figure stepped from the shadows. Thomas Rehfeld. His left arm was still bandaged. He looked thinner than before, face hollowed by years of evasion, but his eyes were sharp. I heard you spoke to Mir, he said. Nora didn't flinch. He confirmed everything. Rehfeld nodded once. Then we don't have much time. Hesperia's main archive is in Berlin, Federal Records Division. But it's not under that name. They buried it under a fake agricultural monitoring project. Alpenschirm. Kroll blinked. Are you serious? Rehfeld smirked. As a drone strike. Nora stepped forward. Then we break in, extract what we need, broadcast it. Kroll looked between them. You're talking about full public release, no filters? Rehfeld's gaze hardened. Do you think the system will fix itself if we whisper? But Nora hesitated. Her instincts didn't fear exposure. They feared the cost. We'll need a cover-up, something loud, to draw attention away from the breach. Kroll was already typing. I can spoof a cyber attack on the traffic control systems in Frankfurt. Force B&D cyber defense to shift resources. Give us a 2-hour window. Rehfeld nodded. Do it. Over the next 4 hours, the bunker came alive. Old maps were replaced with new satellite feeds. Drone recon from Berlin, layouts of the records division, ventilation paths, guard rotation. Every move plotted like a chess match with blood on the board. At 03 and Q, they paused. Nora sat alone in the steel-walled briefing room, her rifle disassembled in front of her. She cleaned each part slowly, with reverence. Rehfeld approached quietly. You still do it the old way, he said. It never failed me. He watched her hands. When this is over, if it works, what then? She asked, not looking up. I disappear, for good this time. No trails, no calls. Just gone. She nodded, not surprised. And if it doesn't work? Then we go down knowing we told the truth. She met his gaze. For the first time in years, the tension between them softened. You let me take that shot in Kandahar, she said quietly. Didn't you? He didn't answer right away. Then, I knew what the order was. I just didn't think you'd follow it. I almost didn't. But you did. And you forgave me? No, he said. I understood you. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Nora stood. Once we release the files, she said, they'll declare us enemies of the state. Terrorists. Traitors. Rehfeld smiled grimly. We were always ghosts. Now we'll just be visible. Kroll re-entered. The Frankfurt distraction is set. Once we trip it, we've got 127 minutes. Max. Nora slung her rifle. Then let's finish what they started. At dawn, 3 people walked out of an unmarked tunnel beneath Regensburg. None of them knew if they'd return, but all of them knew. The war they were fighting wasn't about borders. It was about truth. And some truths had waited far too long to surface. The train to Berlin was the kind no one paid attention to, a regional express from Passau, full of students, pensioners, and business people. Nora sat by the window in civilian clothes, her dark hair tucked beneath a wool cap, a paperback novel in her lap. Kroll sat 2 rows back, reading a magazine but watching every reflection in the glass. Rehfeld didn't come. He had his own route. At 15:43, Kroll received the signal. Frankfurt cyber systems compromised. Air traffic control running diagnostics. BND Cyber Defense rerouting all active monitoring. The clock started, 127 minutes. They exited at Berlin Südkreuz, then slipped into a waiting delivery van registered to a catering company that hadn't existed since 2019. Inside were 2 backpacks. Nora's carried her stripped-down rifle in modular pieces. Kroll's held a signal jammer and drive duplicator. Final approach is on foot, Nora said. 3 entrances. We use Service Tunnel B, less surveillance, reinforced doors, but outdated badge system. Should be crackable. Kroll nodded, fingers twitching. How many guards? 4 internal, 2 external, but shift change is in 14 minutes. We go during handover. They crossed into Tiergarten under light rain, weaving between commuters and cyclists. The records building loomed ahead, dull gray and monolithic. Hidden in plain sight, just like so much else in their world. At 16:17, they reached the rear service lot. Signal jamming starts now, Kroll said, flipping a switch. We have 7 minutes before backup relays come online. Nora inserted a cloned key card. The door clicked. They slipped inside. Down 3 levels. No alarms. Yet. Inside the archive, fluorescent lights flickered. Rows upon rows of steel shelves, cardboard boxes, and biometric safes. Kroll led them to Section 4C, where a digital vault glowed faintly. Drive insertion point, he whispered. Ready. Nora scanned the area. Too quiet. Something's wrong, she muttered. Then the lights shut off. Emergency red strobes activated. Doors slammed shut behind them. A voice echoed through the intercom. Wegner, Kroll, you've come far enough. It was Holman. Drop your weapons, exit the vault, and you will live. Kroll's eyes widened. He betrayed us? No, Nora said, voice cold. He was always part of it. She grabbed the rifle case and dropped to one knee behind a filing cabinet. Start the upload. We'll hold as long as we can. Kroll slid the drive into the port. 30%. Uploading. Footsteps approached, boots on steel. Nora exhaled slowly, centered her scope, and whispered, Time to wake the ghosts. The first shot echoed through the vault like thunder. A helmeted figure dropped before his radio, even flared. Then, chaos. Nora moved between shadows, fluid and precise. Every shot counted. Kroll shouted updates between exchanges of gunfire. 60%! More guards breached from the western stairwell. Nora ducked, reloaded, adjusted her firing arc. Kroll threw a flashbang improvised from drone parts, blinding the next wave. 85%! Then a new voice broke through the intercom. Wegner, Rehfeld, stop this. We can make it disappear. You walk out. We call it an anomaly." It was not Holman. It was someone older, someone from the Bundestag. Nora's voice was clear. That's what you always offered, silence in exchange for obedience. Final warning. Krall's voice shouted, 100%, file transferred, clone secured. Disconnect, Nora ordered. They ripped the drive from the console. Smoke filled the corridor. Fire alarms triggered. They ran. Out the emergency shaft, into a side stairwell, through smoke, bullets, and decades of lies. The ghosts had spoken. Now the world would hear them. The safe house in Leipzig was silent except for the rhythmic buzz of Krall's hard drives cloning the archive data. Nora sat on a stool near the window, her body still tense from the sprint through Berlin's underground hours earlier. The burns on her jacket sleeves were superficial, but the ache in her shoulder from the rifle recoil remained. Rehfeld arrived just before midnight. He didn't speak as he entered, just looked at her, soaked from the rain, her hands still shaking slightly, and nodded once. She returned the nod. Krall emerged from the back room, holding up a drive. "This is it," he said. "Everything we pulled, all files verified, hash-matched, no system anomalies." Nora took the drive. It felt heavier than it should have. "This contains confirmation of Hesperia," Krall continued. "Orders signed off by parliamentary oversight committees, black budgets, cross-border operations, even suppression orders tied to media outlets." "And Einheit Grau?" she asked. He hesitated. "You're listed as Project Falke, confirmed mission logs, confirmed kill assessments. But what?" He looked at her. "There's a file, redacted, labeled Echo 0, with your name. And Rehfeld's. And Lena's." Nora's eyes narrowed. She walked to the table and inserted the drive into a secure laptop. The folder opened. Inside, a memo dated 2012. Authorization, Echo 0. Objective, internal containment. Priority, terminal, upon breach. It listed 4 names: Wegner, Nora, Rehfeld, Thomas. Hess, Lena, K. redacted. Nora stared at it. "They planned it. Kandahar, Lena, all of it." Rehfeld's voice was like gravel. "They put us in the same quadrant knowing what would happen. Used you to clean up their own breach." "And Lena?" Krall asked. "Targeted," Nora whispered, "because she knew too much, and because she was with me." The room fell into a stunned silence. Krall finally broke it. "What now? Do we release everything, all at once?" "No," Nora said. "We stagger it, one leak at a time, enough to create noise, but not chaos. We don't want a media frenzy. We want reckoning." Rehfeld nodded. "I know someone in Zurich, a former EU intelligence analyst turned independent journalist. Unbought, unafraid." "Good," Nora said. "Krall set up the packet distribution, distributed IP nodes, no central trace." He was already typing. Rehfeld looked at her. "And after that?" "We disappear," she said. "For a while, but not forever." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because they'll keep hunting, as long as they think the ghosts can still talk." Krall hit execute on the packet distribution. Somewhere in Brussels, a server received the first file. In Stockholm, a second, then Vienna, then Zurich. The truth began to ripple, not with an explosion, but with a whisper loud enough to shake entire ministries. That night, Nora finally opened her notebook again. She added a name under the heading Verloren. And then she turned the page and wrote another heading, Die, Überlebten. Beneath it she wrote, Wegner, Nora, Rehfeld, Thomas. Krall, Janik. The last page of the past had closed. But the first page of the reckoning had just begun. The media storm didn't come as a wave. It came as fractures. First, a respected investigative journalist in Zurich released a blog post at Euro 317 titled Ghosts in Uniform, The Secret Soldiers of Europe. It was flagged by defense analysts within 12 minutes. Then came the leak on Netzwelt, scanned orders, redacted dossiers, heat maps of training grounds that never appeared on any Bundeswehr map. By noon, 4 Bundestag members were demanding a parliamentary investigation. A BND press secretary issued a bland denial, then deleted it. The machine had been punched in the stomach, and it was starting to bleed. In a quiet cafe in Innsbruck, Nora, Rehfeld, and Kroll sat in the far corner, dressed like tourists. No weapons, no signs of what they'd just done. The cafe was small, the kind of place where no one asked questions. It had one door and a view of the street. Kroll watched his phone. 3 major outlets are running it now. Der Spiegel, Süddeutsche, even Le Monde picked it up. Rehfeld stirred his espresso slowly. They'll call us traitors. Nora nodded. Let them. The longer they yell, the more people will read. Across the street, a plain gray van pulled into a parking spot and didn't move. Kroll saw it. We've got company. Nora didn't look. They won't hit us in Austria. Too risky. Not yet. Rehfeld leaned forward. They'll wait. Wait for us to make the next move. We already made it, she replied. Now it's their turn to run. Kroll looked nervous. How long do we stay in the open? Long enough, Nora said, sipping her coffee. We let them see us. Let them wonder what else we have. Silence settled again. Outside, snow began to fall. Rehfeld pulled out a small envelope, passed it to Nora. This is my goodbye. She looked at him. Where will you go? Off-grid, somewhere even I won't find myself for a while. She didn't ask him to stay. Some things had already taken too much. Kroll looked away, pretending not to listen. Rehfeld stood, nodded to both of them, and walked into the snowfall. He didn't look back. A minute later, the gray van pulled out and followed him slowly. Nora said nothing. Kroll spoke quietly. He knows he won't make it, doesn't he? She nodded. But they won't get the satisfaction. He frowned. You mean he's got his own failsafe? That night, Nora and Kroll boarded a night train toward Slovenia under different names. Their backpacks carried nothing except the clothes they wore and a single encrypted copy of the archive that had shaken a continent. As the train rolled into darkness, Nora looked out at the snowy mountains. They wanted ghosts, she said softly. Now they'll live with the consequences. And the train disappeared into the night. No headlines followed them, only shadows. Somewhere in a small village near the Slovenian border, Nora Wegner sat on a wooden bench beside a frozen lake. It had been 3 weeks since the archive leak. The world hadn't ended. But it had changed. 4 high-ranking officials resigned quietly. 2 were reassigned to diplomatic posts far from Europe. Parliamentary hearings were announced, then postponed. Whistleblower laws were reviewed. And still, no one spoke the name Einheit Grau aloud in public. But the whispers were growing louder. A ripple had become a wave. Behind her, Kroll approached with 2 cups of bitter coffee. He handed her one and sat without speaking. They've frozen 5 of my bank accounts, he said calmly. And someone tried to bribe my sister. Nora nodded. They're grasping. That means we hit them. They'll rebuild, he said. These systems always do. I know, she replied, but not the same way. He sipped, then asked, was it worth it? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she looked out across the lake, where a child skated alone on the ice, bundled in winter clothes, face red with cold and joy. Yes, she finally said, because somewhere out there, someone will ask the right questions now. Someone will refuse the wrong order, and maybe, just maybe, someone will survive because of it. Kroll nodded slowly. And what about us? We stay quiet, for now. He smiled. Until the next lie. Nora turned to him, expression calm. Until the next ghost needs a voice. The wind picked up, rattling the trees. In the distance, a church bell rang once. Life continued, slow, ordinary but not untouched. That evening, Nora opened her notebook one last time. She added 2 names to the second list, Lena Hess, Jonas Bear. And then she closed the cover. No signature, no last word, just a quiet promise between the lines. That the silence once used to hide crimes would now shelter the ones who fought to expose them. And somewhere, in a city that still pretended nothing had happened, a file cabinet in a government basement rattled slightly. Its lock cracked, its contents gone. The ghosts had spoken, and the world would never forget their echo. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share the video.